Oh, the last thing I think I can actually talk to you about today, because all of these are based on memory. And these five videos that I wrote today were literally based on things that I could remember, but I had like a lot more videos written down on the things that I wanted to actually like create videos on. It's funny because a couple of them were from from those notebooks. But anyways, uh, closing loops, right? And one of them is the book that I was writing. So it was a very hard time for me to close it, mainly because the first stage of the book was very building the groundwork for whatever's going to come up. And making a decision for something you're going to be creative about sometimes gives you a bit of like tentativeness and anxiety. And the reason for that is simple because you don't want to do something you might not like it, or you don't want to do something that might not be right, or might end up like taking you in a direction that you didn't want to do. And I realized that because like my book literally is a reflection of how my life was before, what I have to do for it, and then basically what's the future plans and how I'm like entering society. And the second stage of the book, second book, the the book phase two or stage two, or I don't know how to think about it, would literally be my interaction with society. So for now, they're still not done because my platform is not yet in the society, which is going to basically construct the second phase of whatever it is I'm preparing for right now. Now, remember, preparation and growth is always going to be happening, but at sometimes you're always doing something for yourself. For example, a guitarist will practice for 4 or 5 years before he starts performing, and once they start performing, he's consistently practicing and doing stuff, but his performance is a completely different level. It's not just him. So I consider how moving forward is basically the base that I established and the performance that I have to do, the world performance, the dharma of the universe. Maybe we can talk about the Indian theology behind it someday. But so, to end that book, what I did was I decided to kind of like recap in a more in poetry, or in just like in a rhythmical way, to recap the story of the characters in the book and how they went through the world and did what they did until for them to end at like the new point and then start basically doing what they have to do. It's practically my take on the hero's journey and on how basically Gilgamesh as a storyline was taken from me. Like I really want to read Gilgamesh again. I've read it, I think once, and I started reading it another time. But the epic itself is basically just a series of adventures until he finally found himself and became the king that everyone talks about. Although, like, nobody talks about how he became a valid king. They call him a tyrant, but like, he became the good king afterwards. Nobody cares about how he approached the good part, how he approached handling all his past. They just tell you how he got to where he was. But that, like, every single part of it is a journey on its own. And then after he was done with his adventuring and he came back, that was a fucking adventure. That was like a completely like new, different style of adventures and all that cute stuff. But so I had like 8 pages or 9 pages to be done, and they all have to rhyme, or else they would not actually fit with the whole like outline of whatever I was trying to do. And I read the books that I actually wrote, and there were like six copybooks. And after finishing reading them, I knew where I had to start continuing. And I started processing and moving forward. And I basically sat one day and I put it on the schedule. It would be like think and write, I don't fucking care. And normally it happens like this. Like I kind of like imagine the storyline in my head and I pick something to rhyme with and I start basically explaining like sky, passing by, wanting to fly, something with something dry, uh, whatever, man. I can't think of anything right now. I would love to read a part of it, an excerpt of it, but it could be cool. Uh, so here's one. When the day came and life was split from one, in the length of a second, man has become none. For for when all was and nothing was done, more than the sprint was found than his own run. He himself was there to share abundance and fun, but life took over, leaving his body numb. Through he had felt his will aimed steady like a gun, always ready on the trigger, never releasing a stun. And life to himself found it had to shun, when himself had to lose his place under the sun. For that very darkness awakened the one true sun, unknowingly to him his life has just begun. Right? Cool beans. So you reminded me I need to post this today as well, because that's one of my favorite things that I actually got out of this book. And basically just like stuff like this. And I was writing and I was writing and I was like pretty done because like my thought process, everything I'm writing has to be visible on a pillar that is actually like people, anyone entering the new world has to kind of like climb through that pillar in order for them to reach there. And the end of the pillar needs to be a bit more like intense. So I'm going to explain to you. So when I finished with the book and I was like, okay, it's done. In my head, I was like, it's not like complete. There's no oomph to it, and like no, but like I can't, I don't know where to find that oomph. I just don't. So here's something that happened that was very beautiful, and that very like very strange in a weird way. And so I woke up one day, and I think that was like 3 days ago. I woke up and I was wanted to go for my morning walk, and then I was like, you know what? No, because I was going back to the mountain at night. I'll do the walk in the mountain. The weather here is just like super beautiful, and there's a dog I say hi to and I give food to on the way. It's more interactive with me here. So I figured I'd postpone the daily universal walk that I do, and I do it in the mountains. So I woke up and I was like, okay, you know what? Just go to work, open up, and just like do the things that you have to do. And that day, because I had to like, I think that was the day, well, that was Thursday. So I have to just, I had errands to do. And I had to like finish the book, kind of like finish the book, right? Like it was in my head. So while I was doing this, I went down and I started by 7 o'clock. I was like just setting up my day. What do I have to do? Putting in the calendar the things that I didn't and putting the plans because like putting in the timings and slots like this. It's a fun thing to do in the morning, right? It kind of like organizes your day and sets you up. And so while I was doing that, I was like, okay, by 10:30 I have to do this, and it started raining. And as it started raining, man, it rained on me. And when I actually went to the when I went to the to the office, I got to the office and I was like all wet and shit. And on top of all of that, because you run from under the rain and you're wet, so it kind of like makes you feel kind of like you need a shower. It's like very much, I don't know, in Arabic we call it muhabbit, flustered or something like this. Like this is the best way I could explain it, right? Like anytime you feel like you're not hot, but you're kind of like sticky. So I was like, shit, man, you know what? Maybe I should go back home and just get something done with. And while I was sitting there, I was kind of thinking about something that passed over like the day before. And it was like because the day before, this is the day that I actually spoke to my dad and explained to him how I thought. But I kind of like thought about apologizing to a few people because I might have overstepped it, and it was all in my head, right? But for me, I wanted to understand because like I could have done something differently. That's why I wanted to apologize. It's not necessarily I did something wrong, but I could have done something differently. I could have stated it in a different way that couldn't have offended them or couldn't have like triggered them, or maybe because for me, I realized that I don't necessarily understand where they're coming from. And when I give my opinion or when I'm saying something passionately, it comes up from a guy that just has no family, for example, or a guy that doesn't really go have a 9 to 5. So how do I find a way to relate to people that do? But so I was thinking about all these things, and as I was going back home, I was like, let me just go home and I'll write about them because what's making me feel confident enough and what's making me feel a certain kind of way, walk differently, talk differently, I'll just write about them. And I have a copybook specifically for that. Like anytime I want to settle down my thoughts, I have a copybook for that. It's the best investment anyone could ever have. It looks like this, right? So, and when I went there, it was perfect because there were only 2 pages left. So I had to fill these 2 pages. So I wrote some gratitude and I talked about the people that actually impacted me this kind of way and why I feel this way. And I thanked a friend of mine, a cousin of mine, my dad. I also thanked, yeah, I really think like I only thank these three people, and I don't know, but yeah, I only whatever. But so like I was writing, and I was like letting it out because ultimately I have to settle my thoughts in a way where I'm the one who created them. And when I was done, I wanted to change a shirt, and I wanted I wanted to change a shirt basically. So I got with me another chair, and as I was leaving that room, I saw the Tao Te Ching. And I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Tao, but it's this book basically. It's with me, it's with me. It's this book. And for a while last year, what I did was I'd like read an analect, and this is how it's split. It starts with like something, like here's the analect, it starts here, and it reads all the way down to this part. So I'd read something like this every day, and that's how it's split. It's like this is one, two, this has only one analect, this has three, for example, right? Like I just read one of them every day. It doesn't matter. And that day I saw it and I was like, and normally if I put the book like exactly leaving the house, so as I'm leaving the house, I read something and I go. And it's a beautiful way to describe the universe, the world we live in, life, and all that stuff. It's the 4,500 years philosophy. I could talk about this as well. I can't necessarily explain its philosophy, but I could talk about why I thought it was important and the different view on life. But as I was leaving, I actually was looked at it and I was like, oh, okay. So now that I saw it, because normally I notice it, I don't see it. But I actually looked at it and I was like, was moving. I was like, now that I'm moving, let me just read it. And I opened it and there were like basically two analects. One that's completely like exposed to me, and the other one that continues on the other page. I decided to go for the next one. And again, the beauty of energy. And as I was writing, as I was reading, I reached to the end. And this is the ending that I read. Who uses well his light, reverting to its source so bright, will from his body ward all blight, and hides the unchanging from men's sight. The minute I read that, I got all kinds of chills on my body. I'm like, oh my God, this is literally the ending of whatever it is I'm writing. I grabbed it, I grabbed my shirt, and I went all the way back to work, and I finished it. And that's a closed loop that happened after I finished everything myself, and I was like, I can't do anymore. There's nothing more. It fucking came to me. It came. That literally was like everything was kind of positioned to be like, do this, do this, do this. Even going back home, I was like, went home because I wanted to write down the thing, and I was like, I can get a different shirt. I could have just taken my shirt, washed under my armpits or something, and like passed the day the way I normally did. That day, I just couldn't. I was like, go back home, write the thing, thoughts on your head, get them over with, settle them down, write your gratitude on whatever it is you're thinking about. As I went, like everything was pushing me to go back home, and then when I went home, that small book that's always been there was the actual ending of the loop that I had on. So it was such a beautiful experience. I can't wait to experience it with other stuff where when I do something and I like let everything out from myself and there's nothing left, I can't wait to start noticing how everything just comes to me. And thank you for this